Commander Zeftar of the Galactic Coalition had seen many things in his 43 cycles of service. He had witnessed the birth of stars, the collapse of civilizations, and the first contact protocols with over 60 different species, but nothing had prepared him for the humans. The Terran delegation sat across from him in the sterile conference room aboard the flagship Eternal Wisdom. 3 humans, seemingly unremarkable by galactic standards. No natural armor like the Threx. No multiple limbs like the Vidani. No psychic abilities like the Mindari. They looked soft, vulnerable, almost fragile with their pale skin and limited sensory organs. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead diplomat, smiled at him with an expression that made Zeftar's secondary hearts skip a beat. There was something unsettling about the way humans displayed their teeth when pleased. Most civilized species had evolved past such primitive threat displays. "Commander," Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying an odd warmth that seemed to vibrate through his exoskeleton. "We appreciate the Coalition's willingness to consider Earth's application for membership." Zeftar nodded, his mandibles clicking nervously. The humans had been in space for less than 200 of their years, barely a moment in galactic terms. Most species required millennia to develop proper interstellar capabilities and diplomatic protocols. Yet here they were, having somehow leapfrogged past normal technological development. "Your species shows remarkable adaptability," Zeftar replied, consulting his datapad. "Though we must discuss certain irregularities in your application." The second human, Colonel Marcus Webb, leaned forward. His movements were fluid, controlled like a predator preparing to strike. Zeftar had studied Terran biology extensively before this meeting. Humans were supposedly evolved from persistence hunters, creatures that chased their prey across vast distances until exhaustion claimed their victims. The thought made his chitin crawl. "What kind of irregularities?" Webb asked. Zeftar's primary eyes focused on his notes while his secondary eyes watched the humans carefully. "Your technological advancement timeline is unusual. Most species take 15,000 standard years to develop faster-than-light travel after achieving basic metallurgy. Humans accomplished this in roughly 6,000 years." Dr. Chen exchanged a glance with the third human, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenobiologist whose dark eyes seemed to absorb every detail of the conference room. "We've always been quick learners," she said simply. "Indeed," Zeftar continued, "but it's not just the speed of advancement. It's the nature of your innovations. Most civilizations develop defensive technologies first, then exploration, then weapons as a last resort. Humans appear to have developed all 3 simultaneously." Colonel Webb's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. "We're a practical species, Commander. We prepare for multiple scenarios." The way he said "prepare" made Zeftar's breathing spiracles flutter involuntarily. He had read the reports from the first contact teams. Human military vessels were crude by Coalition standards, built with primitive alloys and basic energy shields. Yet somehow they had held their own in 3 separate encounters with Korthak raiders. A feat that should have been impossible. "Your military encounters with the Korthak Confederacy raise questions," Zeftar said carefully. "The Korthak have been raiding outer rim systems for centuries. Their technology is proven, their tactics refined. How did a newly spacefaring species successfully repel their attacks?" Dr. Chen's smile widened slightly. "We got creative." The simplicity of her answer was somehow more disturbing than a detailed explanation would have been. Zeftar had watched the recorded battle footage. Human ships moved in patterns that defied conventional tactical doctrine. They used their own vessels as weapons, ramming Korthak cruisers at impossible speeds. They had somehow turned their technological limitations into advantages. "Creative," Zeftar repeated slowly. "Yes, we noted some unusual tactics. The use of civilian vessels as improvised weapons platforms. The deployment of what our analysts called kamikaze drones. Covers the apparent willingness to sacrifice individual ships for strategic advantage." "War is ugly," Colonel Webb said quietly. "We do what we must to protect what matters." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Zeftar's environmental suit adjusted automatically, but he still felt cold. Most Coalition species viewed warfare as a last resort, a failure of diplomacy. The idea that someone might actively embrace its ugliness was deeply unsettling. Dr. Tanaka spoke for the first time since introductions. "Commander, you seem concerned about our methods." "May I ask why?" Zeftar hesitated. How could he explain the growing unease that had settled over the Coalition leadership Since humanity's emergence on the galactic stage, how could he voice the whispered conversations in the corridors, the nervous jokes about the newcomers from Sol, the way seasoned diplomats requested transfers away from human territories? It's not concern exactly, he said finally. It's more curiosity. Most species follow predictable patterns when entering the galactic community. They seek protection, trade agreements, technological exchange. Humans seem more interested in understanding our weaknesses. The three humans exchanged another one of those looks, a silent communication that spoke of shared understanding and hidden depths. Dr. Chen's smile never wavered, but something in her eyes shifted. Knowledge is power, Commander, she said, and in a galaxy full of unknowns, we prefer to be prepared. Prepared for what? Everything. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Zeftar realized that his secondary hearts had been beating rapidly for several minutes now, a stress response he hadn't experienced since his first combat deployment. These humans, with their soft skin and primitive technology, somehow managed to project an aura of barely contained danger. Perhaps we should review Earth's technological contributions to the Coalition, Dr. Chen continued, opening her own data pad. We've prepared several proposals that might interest your research divisions. As she began outlining humanity's offerings, Zeftar found himself studying their faces more closely. There was an intensity in their expressions, a focus that reminded him of the old stories his grandmother used to tell about the Void Hunters, mythical creatures that supposedly dwelt in the spaces between stars, patient and implacable. The humans spoke of medical advances, of new materials, of innovations in quantum computing, but underneath their words, Zeftar sensed something else. A quiet confidence that suggested they already knew how this meeting would end, as if they had planned for every possible outcome. When the session finally concluded 3 hours later, Zeftar felt drained in a way he hadn't experienced since his military days. The humans gathered their materials with efficient precision, thanked him for his time, and departed with those unsettling smiles still in place. Alone in the conference room, Zeftar stared out at the stars and wondered what his people had gotten themselves into. For the first time in his long career, he felt like prey. 3 days after the initial meeting, Zeftar found himself in his private quarters, staring at classified reports that made his mandibles click with anxiety. Sleep had become elusive since the human delegation's arrival. Every time he closed his primary eyes, he saw Dr. Chen's smile and heard Colonel Webb's quiet words about doing what was necessary. His communications console chimed with an incoming priority message. Admiral Kesavara's weathered face appeared on the screen, her 4 eyes betraying the same unease that had been plaguing Zeftar. "Commander," she said without preamble, "I need your assessment of the human delegation. The Coalition Council is divided on their membership application." Zeftar straightened his posture, though his mandibles continued their nervous clicking. "Admiral, the humans are unusual. Their psychological profiles don't match any known species classification. They appear calm and diplomatic on the surface, but there's an underlying intensity that's difficult to quantify." "Explain." Zeftar pulled up his notes. During our discussion of their military encounters, they showed no remorse for their tactics. Most species express regret about violence, even necessary violence. Humans seem to view it as simply another tool in their arsenal. Admiral Kesivara's expression darkened. The intelligence division has been analyzing their ship movements since they arrived. They've identified every weapon emplacement, every shield generator, every critical system on our flagship. Their scans were so subtle that our sensors barely detected them. The information hit Zeftar like a plasma bolt. They were gathering intelligence during a diplomatic meeting? It appears so, but that's not the most disturbing part. The Admiral's image flickered as she transmitted additional data. "We've discovered that Earth has been monitoring Coalition communications for at least 5 standard years. They know about our internal disputes, our resource shortages, our territorial conflicts with the hegemony." Zeftar's secondary hearts began racing again. "How is that possible?" "Our encryption is supposedly unbreakable." "Supposedly," Admiral Kesavara agreed grimly. "The humans apparently have a different opinion on what constitutes unbreakable. Their computer systems operate on principles we're still trying to understand. They call it quantum entanglement processing, and claim it can solve mathematical problems that would take our supercomputers centuries to complete." The implications struck Zeftar immediately. If humans could break coalition encryption, they had access to every military secret, every diplomatic communication, every strategic plan. They had been watching the galaxy's most powerful alliance like researchers studying insects in a laboratory. Admiral, should we consider them a threat? Kesavara was quiet for several long moments. I don't know, Commander. That's what frightens me. We have protocols for dealing with hostile species, aggressive expansionists, even genocidal civilizations. But humans don't fit any of our threat models. They're not overtly aggressive, but they're clearly dangerous. They seek knowledge more than territory, understanding more than conquest. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to Zeftar's quarters. He glanced at his security monitor and felt his breathing spiracles constrict. Dr. Tanaka stood outside his door, alone carrying what appeared to be a data pad and a small container. Admiral, he whispered, Dr. Tanaka is here. Let her in, Kesavara ordered. But keep this channel open. I want to hear everything. Zeftar activated the door controls and Dr. Tanaka entered with that peculiar human gesture of exposing her teeth. Her dark eyes swept the room, noting details with the same intensity he had observed during their meeting. Commander Zeftar, she said, bowing slightly in what he recognized as a human gesture of respect. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I brought something I thought you might find interesting. She placed the container on his desk. Through the transparent material, Zeftar could see what appeared to be a small plant with delicate white flowers. A peace offering, he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. In a way, this is jasmine tea from Earth. It's meant to be soothing, to promote relaxation and peaceful sleep. Her expression became more serious. I noticed you seemed tense during our meeting. As a xenobiologist, I'm familiar with stress responses across various species. Your mandible clicking and rapid breathing patterns suggest you haven't been sleeping well. The casual way she had analyzed his behavioral patterns was more unsettling than any direct threat. Zeftar realized that every gesture, every involuntary reaction during their meeting had been catalogued and interpreted. You're very observant, he said carefully. It's necessary in my field. Understanding other species requires attention to subtle details. She began preparing the tea with practiced movements. Commander, may I speak freely? Zeftar nodded, acutely aware that Admiral Kesavara was listening to every word. I know you're concerned about humanity's intentions. Your people have been peaceful for millennia, and we must seem like chaotic variables in your ordered galaxy. She poured the tea into a cup designed for his physiology. But I want you to understand something about humans that might ease your mind. What's that? Dr. Tanaka met his gaze directly. We're protective, not predatory. Everything we do, every preparation we make, every piece of information we gather is about keeping our people safe. We've learned that in a dangerous universe, ignorance is the fastest path to extinction. And you consider the coalition dangerous? I consider everything potentially dangerous until proven otherwise. It's how we survived long enough to reach the stars. She gestured to the tea. This plant has been cultivated by humans for thousands of years. We could have chosen something impressive, something that demonstrated our botanical mastery. Instead, I brought you something humble that represents our desire for peaceful coexistence. Zeftar tentatively tasted the tea. The flavor was unlike anything in his experience, complex yet soothing. Despite his suspicions, he found his stress levels beginning to decrease. Dr. Tanaka, your people's rapid technological advancement concerns many in the coalition. How do we know you won't surpass us and decide we're unnecessary? She considered the question seriously. Because we understand the value of diversity. Every species in the coalition has strengths that complement the others. The Threks have incredible defensive capabilities. The Vidani are master engineers. The Mindari provide insights we could never achieve alone. Humans contribute adaptability and problem-solving skills, but we're not interested in domination. Then why gather intelligence on our weaknesses? Dr. Tanaka's expression didn't change, but Zeftar caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Because understanding weakness is the first step in providing protection. If we know where you're vulnerable, we can help you strengthen those areas. If we know what threatens you, we can help eliminate those threats. The words were reasonable, but something in her tone suggested deeper implications. Zeftar realized that humans might be more dangerous as friends than as enemies. Their protection could easily become control. Their help could become dependence. I should return to my duties, Dr. Tanaka said, rising gracefully. Thank you for your time, Commander. I hope the tea helps you sleep. After she left, Zeftar stared at the remaining tea for several minutes before remembering that Admiral Kesavara was still connected. "Commander?" Her voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm here, Admiral." "What do you think?" Zeftar chose his words carefully. "I think we're dealing with a species that views everything as a potential threat or asset. They're not evil, but they're absolutely ruthless in their pursuit of security. They'll protect us whether we want protection or not. Recommendation?" Zeftar looked out at the stars again, wondering if somewhere among them, human ships were already moving into position to protect Coalition territory from threats they hadn't even identified yet. "Accept their application," he said finally, "but watch them carefully, very carefully." 2 weeks had passed since the Coalition officially accepted Earth's membership application. Zeftar thought the uncomfortable feelings would fade with time and routine diplomatic contact. Instead, they had grown stronger. The human embassy ship New Geneva now hung in permanent orbit around the Coalition capital world of Nexus Prime. From his office window, Zeftar could see its sleek form among the more elaborate vessels of established member species. Unlike the ornate Vedani ships with their spiraling towers or the crystalline Mindari craft that caught starlight like prisms, the human vessel was purely functional. It looked like what it was, a weapon pretending to be a diplomatic station. His morning briefing contained 17 separate incident reports involving human personnel. Not violations exactly, but situations that made his security staff nervous. Human diplomatic staff asking detailed questions about Coalition defense protocols. Human scientists requesting access to classified research databases. Human engineers offering to improve systems that had worked perfectly for centuries. The door chimed, and his aide announced that Dr. Chen had arrived for their scheduled meeting about trade agreements. Zeftar steeled himself and activated the door controls. "Commander," Dr. Chen greeted him with that unsettling smile, "thank you for making time in your schedule." She looked exactly the same as during their first meeting, but Zeftar now noticed details he had missed before. The way her eyes constantly moved, cataloging everything in the room. The deliberate placement of her hands, always ready to react. The subtle tension in her posture that suggested coiled energy waiting for release. "Dr. Chen, please sit. I understand you have some proposals for economic cooperation, among other things." She activated a holographic display that filled the air between them with complex diagrams. "We've analyzed the Coalition's current trade routes and identified several inefficiencies that could be corrected with minimal disruption." The display showed shipping lanes that had been established over millennia, refined through countless negotiations between member species. Yet somehow in just 2 weeks, humans had found ways to improve systems that galactic civilization considered optimized. These modifications would increase cargo throughput by 37% while reducing fuel consumption by 22%, Dr. Chen continued. "The changes are simple, requiring only minor adjustments to existing traffic control protocols." Zeftar studied the projections. The math was undeniably correct, but the implications were staggering. "Dr. Chen, these trade routes represent delicate political agreements. The Threx maintain control of the outer spiral routes as part of their territorial sovereignty. The Vedani shipping guilds have exclusive rights to the core world's run. These aren't just economic arrangements, they're the foundation of interspecies cooperation." "I understand the political complications," she replied smoothly. "That's why we're prepared to offer alternative arrangements that satisfy all parties." The display shifted, showing new configurations that somehow managed to increase efficiency while preserving existing power structures. It was brilliant and terrifying. Humans hadn't just identified problems, they had solved them in ways that made their solutions practically irresistible. "How long did it take your people to develop these proposals?" Zeftar asked. "About 6 hours after we gained access to Coalition trade databases." 6 hours. Zeftar's secondary heart skipped again. Problems that had puzzled economic planners for generations, solved in 6 hours by newcomers who had been in space for less than 2 centuries. "Dr. Chen, I must ask directly, what do humans want from the Coalition?" Her smile faded, replaced by an expression of what might have been genuine concern. "Safety, Commander, for our people and for yours." "And you believe the Coalition is currently unsafe?" Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, her fingers moving across her datapad with quick, precise gestures. The holographic display changed again, this time showing a star map of known space. Red indicators appeared throughout Coalition territory. Commander, are you aware that hegemony forces have been conducting reconnaissance in 17 Coalition systems over the past 6 months? Zeftar felt his mandibles lock in shock. That's impossible. Our long-range sensors would have detected any hegemony incursions. Your sensors are designed to detect conventional propulsion systems and energy signatures. The hegemony has been using modified probe ships with damped signatures. They're virtually invisible to Coalition detection methods. Dr. Chen highlighted specific locations on the map. Here, here, and here. Small craft, probably automated, gathering intelligence on defensive positions and fleet movements. How could you possibly know this? Because we've been tracking them. The map zoomed in to show detailed movement patterns. Human sensor technology operates on different principles than Coalition systems. We detect mass displacement, gravitational anomalies, quantum wake patterns, methods the hegemony hasn't encountered before. Zeftar stared at the data, his mind racing. If humans were correct, the Coalition was already under surveillance by their oldest enemy. The hegemony had been preparing for something, and Coalition leadership was completely unaware. Why are you telling me this? Because in approximately 4 standard months, the hegemony will launch a coordinated assault on 3 Coalition border systems. Dr. Chen's voice remained calm, but her words hit like hammer blows. Their probe data suggests Coalition defenses in those sectors are weaker than previously believed. They plan to test your response capabilities before committing to a larger campaign. You're talking about war. I'm talking about a war that's already begun. You just don't know it yet. Zeftar's breathing spiracles fluttered rapidly. What evidence do you have? Dr. Chen transmitted a massive data package to his terminal. Communication intercepts, movement patterns, supply chain analysis, and predictive modeling. Everything we've gathered over the past 18 months of observation. 18 months? But first contact was only 6 months ago. First official contact, she corrected gently. We've been watching the galaxy for much longer than that. It's what we do, Commander. We observe, we analyze, we prepare. The scope of human intelligence gathering was staggering. They had been studying galactic civilization while remaining completely undetected, learning weaknesses and strengths, mapping political relationships and military capabilities. Dr. Chen, your people are asking us to trust intelligence we cannot verify using methods we don't understand. No, Commander. We're asking you to let us help. The display shifted again, showing defensive modifications and strategic recommendations. Humans have certain advantages in unconventional warfare. We think differently than most species, we adapt quickly to changing circumstances, and we're very good at solving problems other people don't want to solve. What kind of problems? The kind that involve making hard choices and living with the consequences. The weight of her words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Zeftar understood what she was offering. Human assistance would come with human methods. If Coalition leadership accepted their help, they would also be accepting a fundamental change in how galactic civilization operated. Dr. Chen, I need to discuss this with Admiral Kesavara and the Coalition Council. Of course. But Commander, time is a factor. Every day we delay gives the hegemony more opportunities to gather intelligence and refine their attack plans. After she left, Zeftar sat alone with the weight of impossible decisions. The data she had provided was detailed beyond anything Coalition intelligence had ever produced. If humans were correct, war was coming whether the Coalition prepared for it or not. But accepting human help meant accepting human influence. It meant acknowledging that newcomers from a small, yellow star had capabilities that dwarfed the combined resources of civilizations millions of years. Older Zeftar looked out at the New Geneva again and realized that the humans hadn't asked to join the Coalition at all. They had offered to save it. The question was whether galactic civilization was ready to be saved by creatures who viewed everything, including salvation itself, as just another problem to be solved. The emergency session of the Coalition Council had been called for the first time in over 300 standard years. Representatives from all member species gathered in the Grand Chamber aboard Nexus Prime, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity that normally filled Zeftar with pride. Today it only emphasized how much they stood to lose. Admiral Kesavara stood at the central podium, her 4 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. Honored representatives, we face an unprecedented situation. The human delegation has provided intelligence suggesting an imminent hegemony attack on coalition territory. Counselor Vorth of the Threx delegation rose from his reinforced chair, his massive frame intimidating even in the peaceful chamber. Admiral, with respect, these humans have been coalition members for mere weeks. Why should we restructure our entire defense strategy based on unverified intelligence from newcomers? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Vidani representative's 6 arms gestured dismissively, while the crystalline Mindari delegate's surface flickered with colors that indicated skepticism. Zeftar felt his mandibles click nervously as all eyes turned to him. As the primary human liaison, his assessment would carry significant weight. Honored counselors, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. I have spent extensive time with the human delegation. Their intelligence capabilities are unprecedented. They detected hegemony probe incursions that our sensor networks missed entirely. Assuming their claims are accurate, interrupted Counselor Yithara of the Mindari. Her crystalline form pulsed with amber skeptics. We have analyzed their sensor data, and their methods are incomprehensible. They could have fabricated everything. Admiral Kesavara activated the chamber's holographic systems. To address your concerns, we have independently verified portions of their intelligence. Long-range surveys of the border systems they identified have confirmed unusual gravitational disturbances consistent with cloaked vessel movements. The chamber fell silent. Independent verification changed everything. Dr. Chen appeared at the chamber's guest podium, having been granted emergency speaking privileges. Her presence seemed to fill the vast space despite her relatively small stature. Honored counselors, she said, her voice carrying that subtle confidence that made Zeftar's chitin crawl. I understand your skepticism. Humans are new to galactic politics and our methods are unfamiliar, but we are not asking you to trust us blindly. The holographic display activated, showing real-time sensor data from human ships positioned throughout coalition space. Our vessels are already in position to intercept the first wave of hegemony attackers. We can prove our intelligence is accurate, but only if you allow us to act. Counselor Vorth's massive fists clenched. You have positioned military vessels throughout our territory without authorization. We have positioned our vessels to protect coalition citizens, Dr. Chen corrected calmly. Authorization was not required for ships operating in international space lanes. The distinction was technically correct, but missed the larger point entirely. Humans had deployed military assets throughout coalition territory while claiming peaceful intentions. Dr. Chen, Counselor Yithara's crystal form shifted to deep red. Your people speak of protection, but your actions suggest conquest. How do we know this is not an elaborate deception designed to weaken our defenses? Dr. Chen's expression remained perfectly composed. Because if we wanted to conquer the coalition, we would have done so already. The simple statement hit the chamber like a plasma charge. In the stunned silence that followed, the implications became clear. Humans had positioned their forces throughout coalition space without detection. They had gathered intelligence on every major military installation and defensive position. If conquest had been their goal, the war would already be over. You're saying you could have destroyed us at any time? Counselor Vorth's voice carried a mixture of outrage and grudging. Respect, I'm saying that human technology and human methods are optimized for scenarios the coalition has never had to consider. Dr. Chen's tone remained matter-of-fact. We don't fight wars the way you do. We don't conquer territory the way you do. We solve problems the way you can't. Admiral Kesavara stepped forward. Dr. Chen, please explain your proposed response to the hegemony threat. The holographic display shifted to show tactical formations and movement patterns. The hegemony expects conventional coalition responses, defensive formations, warnings, negotiations, escalating military presence. They've planned their attack based on 3,000 years of predictable coalition behavior. And humans would respond differently? Zeftar asked, though he already suspected the answer. Humans would end the threat before it fully developed. The display showed hegemony staging areas and supply lines, highlighted in red. Rather than waiting for them to attack our border systems, we eliminate their ability to sustain a campaign. We target their logistics, their communication networks, their command structure. We make it impossible for them to maintain offensive operations. Counselor Yithara's crystal form flickered. You're talking about preemptive strikes on hegemony territory. That would be an act of war. No, Dr. Chen replied. That would be ending a war before it starts. The hegemony has already committed to attacking coalition citizens. We're simply ensuring they lack the capability to follow through. The logic was terrifying in its simplicity. Humans didn't wait for threats to materialize. They eliminated threats at their source. It was a complete reversal of coalition doctrine, which emphasized defensive preparation and diplomatic resolution. Dr. Chen, Admiral Kesavara said carefully, what you're proposing would require coalition approval for offensive military action. That decision cannot be made lightly. Admiral, with respect, you don't have time for lengthy deliberations. Hegemony forces will begin their attack in 17 days. Coalition defensive preparations would take months to implement effectively. Dr. Chen's expression remained calm, but her words carried an undercurrent of urgency. Human forces can resolve this situation in 48 hours. Resolve it how? Counselor Vorth demanded. By making it clear to the hegemony that attacking coalition territory carries unacceptable consequences. We won't invade their space or conquer their worlds. We'll simply demonstrate that their military capabilities are inadequate for offensive operations against human-protected space. Zeftar understood what she was really saying. Humans would destroy enough hegemony military infrastructure to cripple their war machine, while leaving their civilian populations untouched. It was surgical, efficient, and absolutely ruthless. And if we refuse human assistance? He asked. Dr. Chen's smile returned, but this time it carried no warmth. Then you'll face the hegemony assault with conventional coalition forces and conventional coalition tactics. You'll win eventually, because coalition technology is superior and your defensive positions are strong. But you'll lose millions of civilians in border systems, dozens of worlds will be devastated, and the war will last for years instead of hours. The chamber erupted in voices as delegates argued among themselves. Some called for immediate human assistance. Others demanded more time to consider alternatives. A few suggested that human intervention might be worse than hegemony conquest. Through the chaos, Zeftar watched Dr. Chen stand calmly at the podium, her hands folded, her expression patient. She wasn't arguing or trying to convince anyone. She had presented the facts and the options. The choice belonged to the coalition. That patience was perhaps the most unsettling thing of all. Humans weren't desperate for coalition approval. They didn't need permission to act. They were offering the coalition a chance to participate in their own protection. Admiral Kesavara called for order, and gradually the chamber quieted. The council will vote on whether to accept human military assistance. All in favor? Zeftar watched as delegates across the chamber raised their hands, tentacles, manipulator arms, and other appendages. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. Motion carries, Admiral Kesavara announced. Dr. Chen, the coalition formally requests human assistance in defending against hegemony aggression. Dr. Chen bowed slightly. Assistance will begin immediately. We'll have the situation resolved within 2 standard days. As she left the chamber, Zeftar realized that galactic civilization had just crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. They had asked humans for help, and help would be provided. But the price of that help would be the knowledge that their oldest and most powerful alliance survived, only because newcomers from Sol had decided it was worth protecting. 36 hours after the coalition vote, Zeftar stood in the command center aboard the flagship Eternal Wisdom, watching displays that showed something unprecedented in galactic history. The hegemony's military capacity was being systematically dismantled by forces they couldn't see, understand, or effectively counter. Admiral Kesavara moved between monitoring stations, her 4 eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. Report, she ordered. Lieutenant Thexan, a young Vedani officer with 6 arms that moved in precise coordination, gestured to his displays. Admiral, human forces have eliminated 17 hegemony staging areas, 43 supply depots, and 12 command installations. Hegemony communications across 3 sectors have been completely disrupted. Casualties? Minimal hegemony personnel losses. The humans appear to be targeting infrastructure rather than individuals. Most installations were evacuated through what appear to be coordinated warning systems. Zeftar studied the tactical displays with growing amazement and unease. Human ships moved through space like ghosts, appearing long enough to eliminate strategic targets before vanishing again. Their weapons left no energy signatures. Their movements followed no predictable patterns. and their coordination was flawless despite operating across dozens of star systems simultaneously. How are they accomplishing this? Admiral Kesavara asked. Our sensors detect the destruction, but we can't track the attacking vessels. Dr. Chen's voice came from behind them. Because you're looking for ships, Admiral. We're not using ships for this operation. Zeftar turned to see the human diplomat entering the command center, accompanied by Colonel Webb and a third human he didn't recognize. The newcomer was introduced as General Sarah Morrison, whose calm demeanor somehow projected more danger than Webb's obvious military bearing. Dr. Chen, Admiral Kesavara said, please explain what you mean. Human military doctrine emphasizes force multiplication through technology. Rather than sending massive fleets that can be detected and engaged, we deploy autonomous systems that can think, adapt, and coordinate independently. The command center fell silent. General Morrison stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the hegemony territories in real time. What you're witnessing is the work of approximately 3,000 self-directed tactical units. Each one is roughly the size of a coalition fighter craft, but they operate with the intelligence and decision-making capability of a full command crew. Artificial intelligence, Lieutenant Thexon whispered, his 6 arms trembling slightly. Enhanced artificial intelligence, Colonel Webb corrected. Each unit contains quantum processing matrices that can analyze millions of variables simultaneously. They don't just follow programming. They learn, improvise, and evolve their tactics in real time. Zeftar felt his secondary hearts accelerate. Artificial intelligence was heavily regulated throughout coalition space. Most species had learned through bitter experience that truly intelligent machines posed existential risks to organic life. Dr. Chen, he said carefully, the coalition banned unrestricted AI development after the synthwave crisis 800 years ago. Surely you're aware of the dangers? Dr. Chen nodded. We're aware of the coalition's history with AI. That's why our systems operate under completely different principles. They're not trying to replace organic intelligence or achieve independence. They're tools designed to solve specific problems with maximum efficiency and minimum collateral damage. Admiral Kesavara studied the displays showing hegemony territory. The precision of these strikes is remarkable. How do you ensure your AI systems don't exceed their parameters? General Morrison smiled, and Zeftar realized that human military officers were even more unsettling than their diplomats. Because they know we're watching, Admiral. Every tactical unit maintains constant communication with human oversight systems. They understand that their continued existence depends on following human directives exactly. And if they malfunction, then they stop existing. Morrison's tone was matter-of-fact. Human AI systems are designed with multiple termination protocols. If they show signs of deviation from their core programming, they're immediately deactivated and their quantum matrices are dissolved. The casual way she discussed destroying intelligent beings made Zeftar's mandibles click nervously. Humans created thinking machines and then destroyed them without apparent moral consideration. It was a level of pragmatic ruthlessness that most coalition species found deeply disturbing. General Morrison, Admiral Kesavara said, what happens when the current operation is complete? The tactical units will return to their transport vessels and enter dormancy mode. Their mission-specific memories will be archived. Their adaptive learning matrices will be reset, and they'll await new assignments. You're erasing their experiences. We're preventing the accumulation of experiences that might lead to unwanted behavioral evolution, Colonel Webb explained. AI systems that are allowed to retain memories across multiple operations can develop personality traits, personal preferences, even emotional responses. Those traits can interfere with mission effectiveness. Dr. Chen gestured to the displays. The result is what you're seeing now. Perfect coordination, flawless execution, zero deviation from objectives. The hegemony's military infrastructure is being neutralized without unnecessary destruction or loss of life. A new alert appeared on the displays. Lieutenant Thexon's manipulator arms moved rapidly across his controls. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Hegemony High Command. They're requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations. How long has the operation been running? Admiral Kesavara asked. 37 hours. 14 minutes. General Morrison replied without consulting any displays. In less than 2 days, humans had accomplished what coalition military planners estimated would require months of conventional warfare. The hegemony, one of the galaxy's most aggressive civilizations, was surrendering after experiencing the complete collapse of their military capabilities. Dr. Chen, Zeftar said, "What terms will you offer for ceasefire?" "We won't offer any terms. This isn't a human war. It's a coalition defense operation. The terms will be whatever the Coalition Council decides is appropriate." Admiral Kesavara's expression showed confusion. "But your forces conducted the operation. Surely you have objectives beyond simple defense." "Our objective was to eliminate the hegemony threat to coalition territory. That objective has been achieved." Dr. Chen's smile returned. "What happens next is entirely up to coalition leadership. We're simply here to ensure that whatever decisions you make can be implemented safely." The implication was clear. Humans had demonstrated their capability to protect coalition territory from any conceivable threat. They had also demonstrated that their protection extended to whatever policies the coalition chose to pursue. If coalition leadership decided to expand into former hegemony space, human forces would make that possible. If they chose to offer humanitarian aid, human systems would ensure safe delivery. "Dr. Chen," Zeftar asked, "what do humans want in return for this protection?" "Nothing that you wouldn't freely give to any ally." Her expression became more serious. "We want continued access to coalition research databases, participation in trade networks, and the right to maintain our embassy ship in coalition space." "That's all?" "That's sufficient. Humans don't require tribute or territorial concessions. We require information, cooperation, and the assurance that coalition civilization will continue to exist." General Morrison added, "What we don't require is gratitude or acknowledgement. This operation benefits human interests as much as coalition interests. A stable galactic civilization provides the security we need to pursue our own development." As the command center staff processed the hegemony surrender, Zeftar realized that human protection came with a subtle but profound change in the galactic balance of power. The coalition remained sovereign and independent, but that sovereignty now existed under the umbrella of human capabilities. "Admiral," Dr. Chen said, "I should mention that our tactical units detected several other potential threats during the operation. 3 different criminal organizations were planning raids on coalition shipping lanes. A previously unknown species has been conducting unauthorized scientific experiments in the Outer Rim. And there are signs that the Void Seekers may be more active than previously believed." "The Void Seekers are a myth," Lieutenant Thexan protested. "They were a myth," Colonel Webb corrected quietly. "Our deep space sensors have detected energy signatures consistent with the theoretical Void Seeker propulsion systems. They're real, they're active, and they're moving toward inhabited space." Zeftar felt the familiar sensation of his world shifting beneath him. Humans hadn't just solved the hegemony problem. They had identified threats that coalition intelligence hadn't known existed. "How many other secrets of the galaxy have you uncovered?" Admiral Kesavara asked. Dr. Chen's smile became almost apologetic. "Admiral, we've been observing galactic civilization for quite some time. There are many things that coalition leadership might find interesting." As the displays continued showing the systematic dismantling of hegemony military power, Zeftar understood that the most unsettling aspect of human protection wasn't their capabilities or their abilities or their methods. It was the growing realization that they knew everything. 3 weeks after the hegemony surrender, Zeftar found himself in a situation he had never imagined possible, sitting across from defeated enemies who looked more confused than angry. The hegemony delegation had arrived aboard Nexus Prime under human escort, their traditional warrior bearing replaced by something resembling shell shock. War leader Krexmoth of the hegemony military caste sat rigidly in his chair, his scarred carapace telling the story of countless battles across the galaxy. Beside him, Intelligence Director Yarthek's multiple eyes darted nervously around the conference room, as if expecting human tactical units to materialize from the walls. "Honored War Leader," Admiral Kesavara began formally, "the Coalition Council is prepared to discuss terms for permanent cessation of hostilities." Krexmoth's mandibles clicked in what Zeftar recognized as frustration. "Admiral, with respect, I did not come here to negotiate with the Coalition. I came here to understand what happened to my forces." Dr. Chen, seated quietly at the side of the room, spoke for the first time. "Your forces encountered methods of warfare they were not prepared for. That's all you need to understand. That's not all. Krexmoth's voice carried the edge of panic. My fleet commanders reported attacks by vessels that appeared and disappeared without warning. Ground installations were destroyed by weapons that left no trace signatures. Communication networks were disabled by systems that couldn't be detected or countered. Yes, Dr. Chen agreed calmly. That's an accurate summary. Intelligence Director Yarthek leaned forward, his multiple eyes focusing intently on the human diplomat. Our analysis suggests that human technology operates on principles unknown to galactic science. How is this possible for such a young species? Because we approach the same problems from different directions, Colonel Webb replied. Most galactic civilizations developed along similar technological paths, sharing knowledge and building on each other's discoveries. Humans developed in isolation, which forced us to find alternative solutions. Zeftar watched the exchange with growing unease. The hegemony delegation wasn't seeking terms of surrender. They were seeking understanding. Warriors who had spent their entire lives studying the art of warfare had encountered something completely outside their experience. Dr. Chen, war leader Krexmoth said, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and fear. My people have studied coalition military capabilities for 3 millennia. We knew your strengths, your weaknesses, your tactical doctrines. We planned for every possible coalition response to our offensive. But you didn't plan for a human response. We didn't know humans existed until 6 months ago. Krexmoth's composure cracked slightly. In less than 2 days, you neutralized military capabilities that took us centuries to develop. How? Dr. Chen considered the question for a long moment. War leader, your people approach conflict as a contest between opposing forces. You build bigger weapons, stronger defenses, more numerous fleets. You fight battles. And humans fight differently. Humans don't fight battles. We solve problems. Your military infrastructure was a problem. We solved it. The simplicity of her explanation was more unsettling than any detailed tactical analysis could have been. Humans didn't view warfare as combat between opposing forces. They viewed it as an engineering challenge requiring the most efficient solution. Intelligence Director Yarthek activated a holographic display showing hegemony territory. Dr. Chen, our remaining sensor networks detected no human vessels in our space during the attack. How did you deliver your weapons? We didn't deliver weapons, she replied. We deployed solutions. That's not an answer. Colonel Webb gestured to the display. Director, your question assumes that human military operations require the same infrastructure as traditional warfare. They don't. When we decide to neutralize a target, the target becomes neutralized. The method is less important than the result. Zeftar realized that humans were deliberately maintaining an aura of mystery around their capabilities. They weren't sharing technical details or tactical doctrine because they wanted potential enemies to remain uncertain about human methods. Admiral Kesivara cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on the terms of ceasefire rather than analyzing past operations. War leader Krexmoth straightened his posture. Admiral, the hegemony formally surrenders all territorial claims in coalition space. We withdraw all forces beyond our original borders and pledge non-interference in coalition affairs. In perpetuity. Yes, in perpetuity. The surrender was more complete than anyone had expected. The hegemony wasn't negotiating terms. They were capitulating entirely. War leader, Dr. Chen said gently, may I ask why you're offering such comprehensive terms? Coalition forces never entered hegemony space or threatened your core territories. Krexmoth's eyes met hers directly. Because we understand that you could have done so at any time. Our military infrastructure was eliminated so precisely, so efficiently, that we know human capabilities far exceed what you demonstrated. You showed restraint, not limitation. That's a reasonable assessment. Intelligence Director Yarthek leaned back in his chair. Dr. Chen, I have spent my career studying potential threats to hegemony security. In my professional opinion, humans represent the most dangerous species in known space. Dangerous to whom? To anyone who threatens what you choose to protect. Dr. Chen's expression became thoughtful. Director, humans are only dangerous to species that refuse to coexist peacefully. We have no interest in conquest or subjugation. We simply want to ensure that civilization continues to exist. And if someone threatens that civilization, then they stop being a threat. The matter-of-fact way she described the elimination of threats made Zeftar's breathing spiracles flutter. Humans didn't make warnings or ultimatums. They identified problems and solved them permanently and efficiently. War leader Krexmoth stood, his massive frame towering over the seated delegates. Admiral Kesavara, the hegemony accepts full responsibility for initiating hostilities against coalition territory. We offer reparations for any damages and request formal recognition of the new borders. The coalition accepts your surrender, Admiral Kesavara replied formally. We will establish monitoring stations to ensure compliance with the ceasefire terms. That won't be necessary, Dr. Chen interjected quietly. Human systems will monitor hegemony compliance. Coalition resources can be better used elsewhere. The casual way she assumed responsibility for monitoring a galactic superpower demonstrated how thoroughly the balance of power had shifted. Humans weren't asking for permission. They were informing everyone of their intentions. As the meeting concluded and the hegemony delegation prepared to leave, Intelligence Director Yarthek approached Dr. Chen privately. Dr. Chen, he said quietly, my analysis suggests that this conflict was resolved exactly as humans intended from the beginning. You knew how it would end before it started. We considered multiple scenarios and prepared for the most likely outcomes, including the complete capitulation of hegemony forces, including every possible hegemony response. Dr. Chen's smile returned. Director, humans don't enter conflicts without understanding how they'll end. It's inefficient. And if the hegemony had chosen to fight longer, then the conflict would have ended more quickly. As the hegemony delegation departed under human escort, Zeftar remained in the conference room, staring out at the stars. The galaxy felt different now, smaller somehow. The vast spaces between systems no longer represented barriers to human influence. Admiral Kesavara joined him at the window. Commander, what are your thoughts on the outcome? I think we've witnessed the end of one era and the beginning of another, he replied. The age of territorial conflicts and military conquest is over. Humans won't allow it. And the age that's beginning? Zeftar watched the New Geneva hanging in orbit, its sleek form representing capabilities that dwarfed entire fleets. The age of human protection, whether we want it or not. 6 months had passed since the hegemony surrender, and Zeftar finally understood what Dr. Chen had meant when she said that last night had left her uncomfortable. He sat in his private quarters aboard Nexus Prime, writing what would become the most classified report in coalition history. The galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Trade routes optimized by human algorithms now carried 38% more cargo, while consuming less fuel. Research collaborations guided by human analytical systems had produced breakthrough discoveries in medicine, engineering, and physics. Criminal activity in coalition space had dropped to statistically insignificant levels after several pirate organizations simply vanished overnight. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. The coalition was more prosperous, more secure, and more technologically advanced than ever before. But Zeftar had begun to notice the patterns underlying this golden age. His door chimed and Dr. Chen entered without waiting for permission. She had developed that habit over the past months, along with an unsettling tendency to appear whenever he was contemplating uncomfortable truths about human influence. Commander, she said, settling into her usual chair, you seem troubled. Dr. Chen, I've been reviewing recent developments across coalition space. The improvements in every sector are remarkable, but they all share a common characteristic, which is, they all align perfectly with human strategic interests. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral. Elaborate. Zeftar activated his personal display showing shipping routes, research priorities, and defensive positions. The trade route optimizations you provided don't just improve efficiency. They create dependencies. Colonies that once relied on multiple supply sources now depend on single routes that human systems monitor and protect. Efficient logistics require streamlined distribution networks, and the research collaborations have produced extraordinary advances, but they've also given humans access to every significant scientific development in coalition space. Your people now understand our technologies better than we do. Knowledge sharing benefits everyone. Zeftar highlighted security data. Crime reduction is impressive, but it's been achieved by methods we don't understand using surveillance systems we can't detect. How do we know humans aren't monitoring more than just criminal activity? Dr. Chen was quiet for several moments, her dark eyes studying the data displays. Commander, what exactly are you asking me? I'm asking whether the coalition still controls its own destiny. That's an interesting question. She leaned back in her chair. Do you believe the coalition is less free than it was before human membership? I believe the coalition now exists within parameters defined by human capabilities and human decisions. We can choose any policy, pursue any goal, make any alliance as long as those choices don't conflict with human strategic interests. And if they did conflict? Zeftar met her gaze directly. Then I suspect those choices would become impossible to implement. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. You're describing a protection arrangement, Commander. The coalition benefits from human capabilities in exchange for operating within certain boundaries. Protection arrangements require consent. The coalition was never offered a choice. The coalition was offered many choices. You chose to accept our membership application. You chose to accept our intelligence about the hegemony threat. You chose to accept our military assistance. Every decision was made by coalition leadership. But the alternatives to those choices weren't really alternatives, were they? You made it clear that refusing human help would result in catastrophic consequences. Dr. Chen's smile returned, but this time it carried a note of what might have been sadness. Commander, you're beginning to understand the uncomfortable truth about human protection. We don't conquer civilizations or impose our will through force. We simply make ourselves indispensable by creating problems only you can solve, by solving problems that already exist before they become catastrophic. The hegemony threat was real. Criminal organizations were disrupting trade and threatening civilians. Research bottlenecks were slowing scientific progress. We didn't create these problems, but we ensured that only human methods could address them effectively. Zeftar felt his secondary hearts accelerate. Dr. Chen, are you telling me that human protection is permanent? I'm telling you that human protection is necessary. She gestured toward the star display showing coalition territory. Commander, do you know what happened to the 17 civilizations that existed in this region before the coalition was formed? They destroyed each other in territorial wars. They destroyed each other because they couldn't solve the fundamental problem of interspecies cooperation. Competition for resources led to conflict. Conflict led to arms races. Arms races led to mutual annihilation. Dr. Chen's expression became more serious. The coalition solved that problem by creating shared institutions and common goals. But the underlying competitive drives still exist, and humans prevent those drives from manifesting. We channel them in productive directions. Competition for trade advantages becomes collaboration on efficiency improvements. Military rivalries become joint research projects. Territorial disputes become managed resource allocation. Zeftar realized that human protection wasn't just about external threats. It was about protecting coalition civilization from its own destructive tendencies. Dr. Chen, what happens if the coalition decides it no longer wants human protection? The coalition is free to make that decision at any time. And then you'll discover whether coalition civilization can maintain itself without human assistance. Her tone remained calm, but something in her eyes suggested the answer would be unpleasant. Commander, human protection isn't imposed. It's earned through the demonstration of its necessity, by making us dependent on it, by making you successful because of it. The distinction was subtle but crucial. Humans hadn't enslaved coalition civilization. They had made it impossible for the coalition to thrive without human involvement. Dr. Chen, why are you telling me this? Because you asked the right questions. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Commander, I told you once that last night had left me uncomfortable. Do you understand why now? Zeftar considered the question. Because you realized that protecting us meant controlling us. Because I realized that we had become responsible for the survival of galactic civilization. That's a burden humans never wanted, but it's one we can't abandon. After she left, Zeftar sat alone with the weight of understanding. The coalition remained free to make its own choices, but only within the framework of human protection. They could pursue any goal, as long as that goal was compatible with continued human involvement. They could maintain their independence as long as that independence didn't threaten the stability that human systems provided. He looked out at the stars and wondered if there had ever been a choice at all. Humans had identified a civilization worth preserving and had taken the steps necessary to ensure its preservation. The methods were subtle. The control was gentle, but the result was absolute. The most uncomfortable truth of all was that it worked. Coalition civilization was safer, more prosperous and more stable than it had ever been. The price of that security was the knowledge that it existed only because humans had decided it should exist. Zeftar began writing his report, knowing that it would be classified at the highest levels and that its conclusions would never be shared with the general population. Some truths were too dangerous for public knowledge, and some forms of protection required ignorance to function effectively. The galaxy was at peace, prosperity was widespread, and the future looked brighter than ever before. All it had cost was the illusion of independence. As he wrote, Zeftar found himself hoping that future generations would never have reason to discover what existed beneath the surface of human protection. Some nightmares were better left undisturbed, especially when they were disguised as dreams.